When I read this, the words were so different. I don't know. He just worked, some of his versions are so different from what I'm used to. Someone want to read chapter 7, 7 through 11?
I got it.
Thanks.
Keep on asking and it will be given you. Keep on seeking and you will find. Keep on knocking and it will be open to you. For everyone that asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. What man is there who, if his son will ask him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he will ask for a fish, will give him a serpent? If then you who are grudging know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to them that ask him?
Well, needless to say, I had no idea what the stone and the serpent analogies were. And of course, Barclay explained it. Makes sense. You know, you don't know the modern day history of the area. On the next page, it says, Jesus came from a nation which loved prayer. And Jesus's examples are very carefully chosen. The first comparison, the bread and the stone, it says the little round limestone stones on the seashore in the area were exactly the shape and color of little loaves of bread. So that's where that analogy came from. If a child asks for a fish, will a parent give that child a serpent? And Barclay says the serpent was almost certainly an eel, which is a long serpent-like fish with no scales. It has a skin like a catfish. I guess you peel it to eat it. And Jewish people would have known that an eel was an unclean fish because the Bible says everything, I guess this in Leviticus, everything in the waters that does not have fins and scales is detestable to you. Does anyone know if Jewish people even today don't eat crab, lobster, things without?
Yeah, it's even if you don't keep kosher because you grew up being told that it was not clean, that it was a bottom feeder,
Right.
You don't eat it.
Really?
No catfish?
That was something I had never tasted till I got to the South, and I decided it was good and I was going to eat it.
Yeah, because they don't have scales, they have skin. You have to skin them. And I guess the whole point was because it ate rotten stuff that settled to the bottom, it would be you could maybe get sick eating it. So it sounds like it was a prohibition against getting yourself sick.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, eating a lobster, they're bottom feeders and they're full of cholesterol, and there's just nothing you can say about them as to why, other than the fact that they taste really good, as to why you should eat one.
Yeah. And I'm not really sure I would eat it without the butter. I think it's the butter I like, not the lobster.
No, I like the lobster.
I like the
Do you?
lobster.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when they're fresh. Oh.
Yeah.
I have vacationed in Maine several times, and you can have lobster 3 times a day up there, reasonably priced.
Even at McDonald's.
They sell lobster rolls at fast food restaurants.
Well, I remember.
I had a lobster grilled cheese.
Lobster grilled cheese. Never heard of that. Susan?
That was good.
You go to Maine and you're going to have it any way you can get it.
Along the side of the road, they have big barrels, and they'll just sit there, and you can pull off the side of the road and have a lobster.
Good Lord. Wow. The third analogy was if a child asks for an egg, will the parent give that child a scorpion? And evidently there was a scorpion in the area. It was very tiny, and it says there's a pale kind of scorpion, which when folded up looks exactly like an egg.
And that was from Luke.
Yeah.
So any thoughts about that? I mean, if I had not had that explained, I would not have known any of those analogies.
I guess I didn't realize that one looked like the other, and what Barclay keeps saying, it's like God wouldn't that a father wouldn't mock their child or try to feed their child with something that looks like something but is not real food, or you know, the stone looks like bread. You know, you wouldn't
Right.
give someone something that would that would kind of fool you into thinking that it was something good when it wasn't good.
My grandsons still can't figure out, like when we have popcorn every day at 9:30 for snack. And I've told them not to eat the kernels. They scoop their own out of the bag and put it in their cup because that's the age they're at. I can't do it. It won't taste the same. But I tell them they can't get a kernel. 2 months ago, I bit into a kernel and broke a tooth down there. They still don't understand how the popcorn is inside that kernel. Popcorn in here? I'm like, yes, but you have to heat it really hot, blah, blah, blah. And they're just, don't get it.
You could take some kernels, put them in a glass bowl and, put a cover on it and put it in the microwave.
Would it pop like that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I make popcorn.
And you don't put any oil or butter or anything in there? So just the kernels and it'll pop.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Cool, I'll
That's
try
what-
that tomorrow.
That's what an air popper does.
Uh-huh.
That's how I pop my popcorn, is with an air popper. It's nothing but hot air. It pops up beautifully.
Huh, okay.
So if you put it in a glass bowl, they can see it.
They could see it.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks. On page 313 in the middle of the page, it says, God will never refuse our prayers and he will never mock our prayers. God will always answer our prayers, but there's the caveat, he will answer them in his way.
And in his time,
Right.
which is my problem.
I know, we're impatient, imperfect beings. We want it now.
Well, to that point, the last several years of his life, my dad was in extreme pain with his knees. The ends of his had worn away, so he was walking on shards. They tried to do a knee replacement, and he was severely allergic to the anesthesia. They put him under, and he died. So they brought him back up, put him back under again, and he died. So they brought him back up, woke him up, and said, "Sorry, you're stuck with these bad knees." He had the strongest faith of anybody I have ever known. That pain was so all-consuming that it changed his idea about God. He said, God may care about us as humanity, but God does not care about me.
Oh, wow.
And he died in that pain.
Yeah. Did he try to still walk or did he use a wheel?
He was so, you could not pay that man to get on a scooter. He insisted on walking. And the last Father's Day, so this would have been about a year before he died, I took him out to lunch, and it hurt me so much to watch him walk across the restaurant that I said I was never, ever taking my father out again. I couldn't stand it.
I'd have just opted for the scooter. I mean, yeah.
You are talking the ultimate, y'all think I'm stubborn? That's where I got it.
Wow. All righty, at the bottom of 712, let's move along to, it amazes me how he'll put 6 verses together and then he'll have one verse and talk about it for pages. So at the bottom of 314, someone read Matthew chapter 7, only verse 12.
Got it.
Thanks.
So then all the things which you wish that men should do to you, do so too do to them. For this is the law and the prophets.
I did not know until I read the discussion that this is the only place in any religious scripture, anything, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, anywhere, that this is stated in the positive way. In all the other religions, it's stated as a negative. So it would be, to be negative, this is what the other religions say. What is hateful to yourself, do to no other. So the negative spin is the way it is in other religions, because that's easy to do. Think about the 10 Commandments. Oh, that's easy. If the 10 Commandments is all I have to do, not killing somebody, that's easy. No adultery, that's easy. His explanation basically says it's easy not to do something. Jesus's version is very hard, because you have to do for everyone else what you would do for yourself. So you constantly should be in a state of, what can I do for others like I do for myself, which is much harder than simply not doing this list of 10, 20, 30, 50 things. He says the other religions, it's much easier because you just have a list of things not to do. And I thought, wow.
That is, yeah, when you break it down that way, that is so much more difficult.
Yes, and Barclay says Jesus is the only person in any religion that puts it in the positive form.
I didn't realize that.
I didn't either.
No,
I
me
knew
either.
other, the other major faiths had a golden rule, so to speak.
Yes, they do. But it's stated in the negative. And then, of course, he proceeds to state it in, let's see, Buddhist, Hindu, Confucianism, Greek, Roman, Stoics. I mean, he goes into some explanation on 315 and on. So he backs up what he says with evidence. What is hateful to yourself, do to no other. And he basically says, this is the golden rule in the negative form. And then he gives a bunch of examples. Let's see. He said, this is a brand new teaching, never been said this way before. Confucius, he mentions Buddhism, Greeks, Romans, Stoics. And then he ends the section at the top of 317 by saying, no one but Jesus ever put it in its positive form. Yeah, I was thinking about it when I prepped for the lesson, and I thought, well, yeah, if somebody gives you a list of things not to do, that's kind of easy, because there are things like don't kill, don't steal, don't, you know. But anything you want done for you, you must do for others. Well, that's an endless list. That's everything. Thoughts?
Yeah, that higher level of responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine what the world would be like if we all did that. If
Tamara?
everybody considered everybody else all the time.
Wouldn't it be nice if every social media made you read this before you could post anything? Think of the bullying that might be prevented.
There's so many people that I'm friends with, and even some of my relatives, they post things on Facebook they would not say to your face.
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't even say in a room of people, or even privately at a meal, they wouldn't say it. But they'll throw that stuff right up there on Facebook. I've had to unfollow some cousins.
Yeah, same here.
I didn't get started with it.
Well, I only got started because I thought I was going to get grandbaby pictures, and Jason and Holly don't put them on Facebook. So, oh well. All righty, continuing on page 317, it says, let's see, let us see just how the positive form of the golden rule differs from the negative form. And he says it's not essentially a religious rule at all. It's simply a common sense statement. And then he talks about the negative form of the rule involves nothing more than not doing a certain list of things. He said it is never very difficult not to do things. He said it is rather a legal principle. Like we have laws that say you can't murder, you can't steal, you can't lie in court. So he says it's really a legal principle. When this rule is put positively, when we are told that we must actively do to others what we would have them do to us, a new principle enters into life and a new attitude to others. And then he says something that got my hackles up. I didn't like it. He says, that only love can compel us to do. The attitude which says, I must do no harm to people, is quite different from the attitude which says, I must do my best to help people. Well, when he says to act that way, only love can compel us to do that, the first thing that came to my mind was the donations our CWF gives every month to the battered women's shelter at the Richmond YWCA. I don't not only love those people, I don't even know who they are. I don't know who gets the benefit of the things I give. I don't not love them, but I don't love them like family or church friends or.
Kitten, remember somewhere back, we studied the different types of love.
Oh, okay.
And we do, and you do love those women based, which type of love is it, Kathy? I don't remember the word.
There's
Right.
filial, agape.
Right, it's the agape love that you are, that we express by giving these donations, because the salad group does the same thing with Safe Harbor.
Okay.
So it's, you are expressing agape love by doing that.
Well, in a way, I do care for them. I don't want them to be battered. I want them to be able to have the resources to break away and not be forced to go back to the men that are battering them. But I never really thought of it as, I guess I'm thinking love, like.
No, it's not a relationship like with your children or your husband, but it
Okay.
is that
Even with us.
love.
Care for their well-being.
Yes.
Yeah, and I do care about their well-being.
The other way you would be, some people give so that they can take it off on their tax donations.
Oh,
Now you
So
can't do that.
that's maybe not the same kind, but that's not the kind that Christ is talking about.
right, right.
But Susan, even if you take it off on your taxes, the tax benefit is only a small, if you give $100, your taxes only go down by 20.
Yeah, I just used, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, have an accountant here, but that's not, I use that as an example, as giving for other reasons.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there are lots of reasons to be nice.
Oh, I gave all this money and I'm, everyone's going to see that I gave all this money,
Yeah.
kind of like
That's like the Pharisees. Oh, look at me, I'm so good. I'm so glad I'm not like that sinner over there.
right. And Jesus saying, that's not the way that's a sin.
Right, exactly, to say that. Joe, did you have a contribution?
Was going to say, unless it puts you in a lower tax bracket, if you were right there, and you could give to, lower your percentage, but I know people that, spend $1,000 an hour with a tax attorney to save $1 because they just couldn't stand it. So,
Yeah. And the other thing about not bragging about it, I give to Feed More, so I get their annual report and they list all the people, and I'm sitting there thinking, I wouldn't want my name there,
Right, I agree.
It's there in the very bottom category, but it's like, don't do that.
Yeah.
People don't need to know.
All right, let's move along on page 320. If someone would read Matthew 7, 13 and 14. We're going to get 2 verses this time.
I got it.
Thank you.
Go in through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road which leads to ruin, and there are many who go in through it. Narrow is the gate and hard is the way that leads to life, and those who find it are few.
Don't y'all find that an odd wording for something we know so commonly as, that wording is just so odd. The path to heaven is narrow and the path to hell is wide.
Are you talking about Barclay's translation is narrow?
Whichever one he used, yeah, whichever. And I think at the front he told us.
Yeah, this is his translation.
So they aren't, it says scripture quotations contained herein are from the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, Anglicized edition 1989. So I assume that's what all of these are. That's what it says in the front. And I highlighted it. I always like to know when I read a book what version they're using. So he says.
I thought they were, right, because I'm pulling out my NRSV.
Oh, okay.
Is this NRSV? No, this is the RSV.
Yeah,
to
this is,
another part of the house. I thought these were his translations, because this is
I did too.
what we know.
They mentioned it in one of the last verses that we had, that he adds, keep on seeking, keep on
Right,
right,
right.
praying.
well, you know what, I guess in the description, maybe when he's quoting Bible verses in the description, that's the
Yes.
version he's using.
Yes,
Okay, but the verses themselves are his interpretation.
yes.
Okay, that
Yeah,
makes
but
sense.
He incorporates some extra words, like in the last, back on the prayer one, keep on. He adds some words to get to the nuance of the meanings.
Well, it does help us understand. It just isn't familiar.
Right, right.
So this is basically, you need to make very careful selections because the road to heaven is narrow, the road to hell is wide. It's easy to follow. I guess we all have memory of when we were younger, we were on the wrong path, either for a minute, an hour, a day, a week, a semester at college, whatever. But then he gives examples about Moses saying, choose life so that you and your descendants may live, which is a different way of saying the same thing. Then he quotes Joshua. Joshua says, choose this day whom you will serve, which would keep you on the path, the narrow path. And then at the top of 321, he gives a short piece of verse by John Oxenham, whom I've never heard of, but it was very, did anyone else read and like that at the top of 321? It just was, I'll read it real quick. To every man there openeth a way and ways and a way, and the high soul climbs the highway, and the low soul gropes the low. And in between on the misty flats, the rest drift to and fro. But to every man there openeth a highway and a low, and every man decideth the way his soul shall go. I just really liked that.
Yep, we have a choice.
We do. I like the part where he says the rest of us drift to and fro. I just saw us on a raft out in the ocean.
Yeah, but we go
Drifting.
along with the crowd, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh, I've done that plenty of times. I guess
But
many of us.
take the golden rule, the last verse, with these two verses, and you put it together, and
Yeah, right. It's really interesting. I made better choices in high school than I did in college. And I don't think it had to do with living with my parents. It was just easy in high school not to do what everybody else was drinking and having sex and smoking weed. And I mean, everybody in my high school. Needless to say, I didn't date.
Right, same here.
Yeah, I really, it was so easy to me. Those were like non-choices. I'm like, what are you guys doing? They were smoking weed in the back of the bus at basketball, going to away basketball games. And I'm like, wow, I just want to play basketball and eat out at the Tasty Treat, I was so stupid. But then I went to college where there were, no holds barred, and you literally could go and do anything. And I went with a group of girls out to Hampton Sydney one time, and I got stranded. They all hooked up with boys and spent the night. And I'm like, whoa, I had to call the campus police and have them come fetch me at 2 a.m. I'm like, what are you people doing? You just met these boys. Wow. Let's see, on page 321, he talks about, let us examine the difference in the two ways, the highway and the low way, the narrow way, the wide way, the sinful way, the holy way. First of all, he says, it's the difference between the hard and the easy. And he talks about how nothing that's easy is worth having. If it's easy, there's a catch. And anybody have a comment? I think these explanations of the narrow and the wide way are pretty simple. I don't think they need a lot of discussion, but
Is
I
that
mean,
why when we get older, everything's hard to do?
well, I don't think that's what it means, just because your body's frail. But you spend all this time getting a college degree or refinishing furniture or, working in your yard, and you're happy with the results, but boy, it takes a long time to get good results if you want good results. He talks about piano players, golfers, how much time they spend honing their craft. Other thoughts?
About your story about being stranded and having to call the police, it reminded me of the prodigal son story, where you have the good son, who stays there on his farm and does everything his father says, and the prodigal who goes off and loses all his money that he's given to his father, and his father welcoming him back. And I think about those kids that were staying and smoking weed, doing all of this, and hopefully, they came back too.
The story of the prodigal son bothered me for 20, 30 years until somebody explained to me at Bon Air that it might have been one of you guys, when the wayward son comes back, he had already squandered his inheritance. He got to come back and work on the farm, but he didn't get another dole of inheritance. He basically was another worker. He was welcomed back, but the older son still ran the place and owned everything. And I was like, oh, well, that's fair. And all of a sudden that story was fine with me. I thought the wayward son came back and got half the stuff again.
He just got welcomed back home.
Yeah. So once I understood that, I was okay with that because it was fair. It was equitable.
Well, then you have problems with the story where the people who started working later in the day got the same pay as the people who didn't.
Yeah, that one does bother me too. But if I were
Happens in life.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Getting
Well,
about hard work and how long it takes to do something really well. In one of Malcolm Gladwell's books, I forget which one, he said it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at anything. And you can apply that. There are a lot of people that you hear who become famous musicians or whatever, and they're overnight successes. And I hear so many of them say overnight after I played in bars and honky tonks for 25 years.
right. Yeah.
And so I think to put that in a spiritual context, we look at the people that we look to help us interpret all these things. They have spent their 10,000 hours and then some contemplating, praying, thinking about these things.
Well, if you read any of the books and devotionals by Mother Teresa, her entire life, she questioned things.
Yeah.
She never had a handle on totally understanding everything. And she studied the Bible, I'm sure way more than we do. And she still questioned a lot of things in the world. She was very dissatisfied with the inequity, the distribution of funds and resources in medicine. And
Thomas Merton did too.
yeah. So when you read their stuff and you realize he's 60 when he wrote it, you're like, wow, he's questioning the same things we are. It makes me feel okay, I guess, that I'm still questioning things.
Yeah.
All right. Another way to compare the narrow way and the broad way on page 322 is it is the difference between the long way and the short way. If we take the short path to anything, home ownership, a job, a spouse, there are often issues, problems. You always should slow down, take your time, investigate, gather information to make a good decision. I'm sure we can all remember times where we made a hasty decision to our detriment. And then he talks about Horace, people who wrote and how long it took them to write things. He talks about Horace, the Latin poet, Virgil's Aeneid. It took him 10 years to write the Aeneid. Plato's Republic, and it says Plato wrote the first sentence of the Republic 13 times, and it's scribbled out in the margin, so they know how many times he rewrote it. He talks about Thomas Gray's Elegy written in a country churchyard. Have you guys read that? Oh my gosh. I just happened to reread it last month. I went back through my poetry book again. It's so beautiful. And it said it took him from 1742 to 1750 to write one poem, 8 years to perfect it. And I'm sure he put it down, came back to it, put it down, you know, but it's a beautiful poem if you haven't read it.
What is it? What's the title?
Elegy, written in a country churchyard.
You know, another
Thomas-
thing though that you hear is that some people will say that they were sitting down and thinking about something, and that the thing that they wrote ended up almost wrote itself.
Right.
You know, that it almost comes automatically. And I think that we've experienced that kind of thing where something just comes out and it's like it was a gift to you. It was something that you wouldn't have normally done, you know, but the circumstances.
What's the name of the blind lady that wrote all the hymns?
Fanny,
Yes. Fanny something. She wrote hundreds of hymns. She would wake up in the middle of the night and would have to, I guess, read it or recite it to somebody, or would wake up in the morning and would write 3 complete hymns from dreaming, I guess.
Yep, some people it just comes to them.
Casey.
Yeah. Barclay says, no one ever arrived at a masterpiece by a shortcut. The lasting things never come quickly. The long way is the best in the end. Can anybody give an example of something that was accomplished quickly that was successful? I think a lot of people are skeptical about the vaccine because of that very thing. They're worried about side effects down the road, or, you know, they didn't test it on pregnant people. They didn't test it on children.
What they miss is that this research on that type of vaccine has been going on for 20 years.
True.
Yeah.
It didn't just start a year ago.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So,
Because the class of viruses it's in, we've been working with for decades.
mhm.
Yeah.
it was Fanny Cosby,
There you go. Good job.
and she wrote 8,000 hymns and songs.
Yeah, isn't that a and was blind, couldn't write.
Right, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
I actually was sitting next to somebody. We were waiting for a huge document to come off a printer. And he was the vice president of academic affairs at Virginia Union, but he was a musician. And he's sitting there, and all of a sudden he picks up a piece of paper and starts drawing lines and starts writing this. He said, I have to write it down before it leaves me. It had just gone.
Wow.
And I'm just sitting there going, he said, it's in there. I've got to get it out or I'll lose it.
Sarah, are you left brain like me?
Oh, severely, yes.
Yeah, me too. Nothing creative ever comes to me.
No, Sarah, you and you two, Kitten, both of you write so well.
What?
Yes, and speak so well. That is definitely
Right,
you
right.
are examples of both sides, and I am
Yeah.
strictly the one side. You know, the
I
math
actually-
side in me is completely defunct.
Actually used to have a brain test, and it was multiple choice, and it was supposed to tell you if you were right-brained or left-brained. And Claire, you're right. I do have some of that, but I'm more left-brained. And whether you were visual or auditory learner. And I took it many times. So I'm left-brained and I'm visual, but I've got all of it. And the first time I took it, I split both scales right down the middle. And the analysis said that, you know, you're equally, and because of that, you're frequently confused. because your brain is overwhelmed in terms of the visual and auditory. Your brain is overwhelmed trying to bring it in 2 different ways. So it takes you longer to learn something, but once you've got it, you've really got it. But it was a detriment when I was taking flying lessons. I'm visual. when I became overwhelmed, my ears quit working. If air traffic control is talking to me and I'm feeling overwhelmed, I don't hear air traffic control at all. And luckily my instructor was there going, how did you miss that call? And I'm thinking, because I was so busy looking at everything I'm supposed to look at.
Susan's got
Wow.
a big dose of that.
Say that again, Bud.
Susan's got a big dose of that. I talked to her and she doesn't hear squat.
I'm sure that only happens in your household, Bud.
You know, one of the things from working with special ed kids or in special ed for so many years was I, learned that there's more than one way to learn how to do something.
I
And-
was
And then
fortunate
when
that
I put that to use it took me a long time to put that to use in myself. And so
All the
that
people
helps me,
generations who couldn't read, and they did wonderful things.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you work in special ed, Barbara can tell you this, you can list off, there's a long litany of very famous, productive people who couldn't read or write. And because of their learning disability, because they didn't have the instructional techniques available to them then that are available now.
well, school is definitely a left brain venture. They've incorporated more right brain traits, and luckily I taught biology so we could learn the heart and then draw a picture of the heart. And, we had visual things we could do. Here's a plant and all the parts, and now let's draw it and label the parts so the visual people could get it. But math is not like that. Math is, if you don't get the whole, it's not tangible. It's very abstract. If you don't do abstract, it can be very challenging. You don't see it. Math is the SOL that keeps the most number of kids from graduating school. So, but they've done away with those. So, all right, let's try to finish up. I think I'm going to finish what I planned to cover. Woohoo! On page 323, it says, the narrow way and the wide way is the difference between the disciplined and the undisciplined way. Let's see, have been ruined because many people have been ruined because they abandoned discipline and let themselves go. And then he mentioned the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who wrote the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. And I'm like, wow. So I pulled out my poetry book real quick, and in the 500 best poems anthology, I think 4 or 5 of them are his. And if you read this description, he moved from thing to thing. He was not focused. He was not disciplined. He knew famous people and hobnobbed with other famous poets and writers, but unlike them, he could not discipline himself to put what was in his head on paper. He would talk to people and tell them and say like pieces of a poem, so people knew he had it in his head. He just couldn't get it down on paper. I never knew that about him because what I have read by him is so good. I just assumed he wrote hundreds and thousands, but they said nope. Any thoughts about anyone or any project that you never could complete? There are many books that I've started. Ulysses, how many times have we started Ulysses? Sarah, did you ever read it?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I tried.
Y'all know I'm going to Lifelong Learning Institute by way of Zoom. And there's a woman there that does art appreciation classes. So she's done one, and they're like 6 classes per course. She did one on Leonardo da Vinci, and last term we did Michelangelo. And both of those men left more unfinished projects than they ever completed.
Wow.
That sounds like my sewing room.
Yeah, same here.
Well, I have to say, I'm an avid reader of lots of different media, newspapers, journals, magazines, and novels. There are very few books that I ever start that I don't finish because I'm if I start it, I finish it kind of person.
Yeah.
But I only read books that come to me highly recommended by media sources, friends, book club. And if I read a book club, if I see a book club book that I know I'm not going to like, I don't waste my time fooling with it. I just tell them, I'm coming next month to socialize, visit, and eat the snacks, but I'm not reading the book. That's a waste of my time.
I think Barclay makes some good points in this section, but I'm not sure for much of humanity, for much of us, that it's as clear cut this how he says it. It's not as but I think he makes good points.
Well, I have a very disciplined
Fire
son
too.
who's an engineer and a very undisciplined son. And they both have families. They both are successful. They own homes. I don't know. Daniel is just fly by the seat of your pants. Hey, let's wake up and make a plan for today. Drives me insane. Let's hop in the truck and ride. Where are we going? Where are we going to eat lunch? Is the tank full of gas? Blah, 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 blah. Let's just get in the truck and ride. What the hell is that? No, no. So are all of you opposites? He's a B type, I'm an A. He's right brain, I'm left.
I'm a reformed A. I spent so much of my life being angry at the rest of the world because they weren't doing it just the way they should.
You need to program a kitten.
When I figured that out, I let go of it. Well, he hasn't let go of it yet. So
Wow.
if he wants to do something, I just stand back and let him do his thing. You know, his flock fed the homeless yesterday. And he, of course, you know, did the ultimate planning, and y'all know Tom. When I do mine in September, I pick up the phone, I call Sibley's Barbecue, I order enough food for 30 people. Where it really gets to be a problem is when I'm preaching, because Cindy will call me weeks, sometimes months, usually not months, but several weeks in advance if she wants me to preach. And I'll read the scripture. As soon as I say yes, I read the scripture and maybe do a little bit of research, and then I cogitate on it and I let it work. 2 weeks before I'm supposed to preach, he's quit doing it now after 10 years, but 2 weeks before I'm supposed to preach, he'd say, let me read your sermon. Well, I don't have it. What do you mean you don't have it? You're preaching in 2 weeks. How do you not have the sermon? So I do a Cindy, you know, although it takes me weeks, I'm writing it Friday. And he's having fits.
Yeah, I couldn't do that.
I have a word that I came up with years ago, and it isn't in the dictionary yet, but it's called Pro-Genation. Okay, and it's the ability to progaginate so much, but gauging it so that you can procrastinate, but you have the ability to gauge it so that you will start and finish it on time.
Yeah.
Progagination is the ability to procrastinate but still finish it on time.
I can see that, Susan. I have done that on occasion, not often.
But really, Sarah, you had been thinking about that for 2 months.
Yeah, and there was one time, because Tom will do research and drown me in materials to read. There was one time I didn't want him to bother me. And I didn't tell him until Friday that I was going to preach on Sunday, and it hurt his feelings. So, but on the way home that day, and I wish I had recorded it because he doesn't remember it. He said, I need to learn to trust you. Your way is not my way, but today could not have gone any better.
Wow, very nice. Good job, Tom.
Way to go, Tom.
Okay, my last point for today is number 4, the narrow way compared to the wide way. It is the difference between the thoughtful and the thoughtless way. He says, the easy way may look very inviting at the moment, and the hard way may look very daunting. But like most tasks, if you just break it down step by step, like Sarah just described, you read the scripture, you do a little research, you cogitate on it, you break it down in bite-sized pieces. And I remember having a conversation with Gina one time about how she teaches Angel things. You can't tell Angel you're going to do this great big thing. You're going to do this little thing and this little thing and this little thing. And then go get your towel, change into your swimsuit, get your whatever toys, and then now let's get in the car and go to the pool. And I guess somewhere along the way, Angel at the age of 12 now can figure it out. Maybe not. You can take, Jason used to just do a task and he would make a written plan, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, write the paper, turn it in Monday. Daniel thinks it out in his head, but he will write nothing down, and it infuriates me. Everything gets done or not, some things not. He made it,
But there's
Just-
also a certain joy to life for serendipity.
Well, and Daniel's the beneficiary of a lot of serendipity. Daniel's had a lot of things fall into place, and Michael will tell you, he's the beneficiary of a lot of things just falling into place. So he's got God sitting right there, because God must love that boy. I mean, I don't know. A lot of things happen that way for him. So that's where I wanted to be today. So my lesson today I thought was very easy. Nothing seemed to be real controversial. It seemed to be easy to study and easy to explain. So I was thankful for that.
To implement.
These are all verses that we've known by heart since we were kids, that I think we all have worked hard to try to adhere by them too.
But his wording is just his wording is so unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does. He gives that.
Very unique.
Mhm.
Sure.
See you guys in church.